morning. Welcome to the Sunday morning service at the DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Linda Clark, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. Unitarian Universalism is a faith tradition committed to creating a just and flourishing world for all people. Our Universalist theology tells us that every person is worthy of love. When we say, whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here, this is our message of love to you, inviting your whole self into the space to help us co-create a world centered on our values. We invite you to learn more about us and consider this community to enact our values of equity, justice, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Now, if you are online, I'd invite you to greet each other through the chat, and if you're here, talk to someone you don't know.
Across the generations, we have carried the flame, We fought the injustice, sang the songs, spoke for truth, and built something lasting. We join in the line and we carry the flame forward.
Across the generations, we are tending the flame. Hand in hand, together, we share in the work of fighting injustice, singing the songs, speaking the truth. And we are here to build something lasting. We join in the line and we carry the flame forward.
Across the generations, we have been nourished by this flame. We are singing new songs, breaking old barriers, sharing in the work. And as we find our own space in what has been, we are here to make space for the next person as well. We join in the line and carry the flame forward.
Across the generations, this flame comes to us. We are here for the songs, for the justice, for the community. Sharing the work, we are here now to build something new and lasting. We are ready for a new day together. We join the line and we carry the flame forward.
And to see the sacred within each other. Today, I am joined in the pulpit with our Mid-America Regional Lead, the Reverend David Pyle, and we are delighted to honor Veterans Day this week and also take time in the midst of all of the news this week to be together. Come, let us worship together.
Please rise in body and spirit and join us in singing hymn number 1, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door.
Good morning. I invite Thank you. I invite you to join me in the mission statement of our church. We gather as an inclusive community to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world toward fairness, love, and compassion.
Our vision of beloved community is rooted in the relationships that we have with one another, our earth, and creation. Each week we offer the opportunity for our joys and sorrows to be shared aloud here in the pulpit. Today, our flowers were given by Edna Groves in memory of Tom Groves, her husband, who was well loved by all his family and well liked by anyone who ever knew him. Amen, indeed. I only have one concern that I'd like to share with you, and that is remembering our member, Danielle Baker, who is still missing and considered in endangered circumstances by the police. She has not been seen since June. We held a vigil here a few months ago to hold her in our hearts, and we continue to do so in this moment. It is time to remember Danielle and also her son and her mother. May they all be held in love in this time of unknowing. Whether our joys or our concerns are held in our hearts or shared aloud here, know that this community cares for one another. I am available, as are our pastoral ministries associates, if you would love to share a joy or if you'd like a moment to reach out and talk to someone about a concern. We are here. Please reach out. Please join me in a moment of meditative silence.
Now please rise in body and spirit and join us in singing hymn number 95, There is More Love Somewhere.
I'm gonna keep on
Mr. Eichhardt wrote, "If the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough." Today, on this Veterans Day weekend, we wish to mark a part of our service with a thank you to our siblings and kin who have served in the Air Force, the Army, Coast Guard, Navy, and Marines. To say thank you to all who served, whatever their role, wherever their service took them.
We say thank you to those whose service was brief, and to those who made a career of their service. We say thank you to those who remember their service with fondness and those whose time in the service still haunts them. We say thank you to those who returned to us largely intact, who found jobs, started families, and who continue to find ways to serve their communities. We say thank you to the veterans who returned with brokenness, so deep that they continue to struggle to find a role or even a home in our communities. We thank you to the families who have navigated the unknown of the days, months, years without a parent, a partner, or a child. I invite you to stand if you have served in the military. I invite you to stand if your spouse or partner or parent has served in the military. I invite you to stand if you have another family member who has served in the military. To all of you, our deepest, sincerest gratitude for your service and your sacrifice. And look around at how many people are standing.
You may be seated. We know the toll that military service has on its veterans, families, and communities. As a community that recognizes the inherent worth and dignity of all people, let us remember those who have served not just this weekend, but always. And more so, let us work as a community to ensure that veterans and their families receive the support they need always. Amen.
Giving of our treasure is how we reciprocate the many gifts we are given by this community. Your contribution supports the programs and operations of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. Giving is also how we live our values in the world. Each month we share our offerings with an organization nominated by the congregation and selected by the special offerings team. In the month of November, our shared plate recipient will be SCARES, which stands for School and Community Assistance for Recycling and Composting Education, nominated by DUUC member Susan Camasta. SCARES is an environmental educational nonprofit dedicated to creating sustainable communities. We accomplish this through innovative and hands-on education programs for schools and organizations, demonstrating care for people and our natural resources through our Reuse Center, and engaging the broader community through community-wide events and programs. This morning's offering to support the work of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church and SCARES is given and received in a spirit of generosity and gratitude.
What Kind of Times Are These? By Adrienne Rich. There's a place between two strands of trees where the grass grows uphill. And the old revolutionary road breaks off into shadows, near a meeting house abandoned by the persecuted who disappeared into those shadows. I've walked there, picking mushrooms at the edge of dread, but don't be fooled. This isn't a Russian poem. This is not somewhere else, but here. Our country, moving closer to its own truth and dread, its own ways of making people disappear. I won't tell you where that place is, the dark mesh of the woods meeting the unmarked strip of life, ghost-ridden crossroads, leaf mold paradise. I know already who wants to buy it, sell it, make it disappear. And I won't tell you where it is. So why do I tell you anything? Because you listen. Because in times like these, to have you listen at all, it's necessary to talk about trees.
Please rise in body and spirit and join us in singing hymn number 298, Wake Now My Senses.
Many years ago, my partner Elias and I were sitting in the office of his ministerial supervisor who was overseeing his internship. It was re-election season for George W. Bush, a time when we waged war on two nations in retaliation for the events of 9/11. A woman came into this tiny church with just the three of us present, looking to solicit votes for the Republican Party. Assuming, of course, that this tiny church in a tiny conservative part of New Jersey was a good place to put Republican voter registration cards. Elias and I amusedly watched as his ministerial supervisors spoke circles around Christian values and politics to this poor woman who was really just trying to drop off some pamphlets. After she left, I remarked that the election was a struggle for me. In context now, that feels a whole different thing. But at the time, it was a struggle, particularly with very Republican parents and extended family. It felt like I was bracing for impact. Like a collision was incoming, and all I could do was tense up and await what was up in front of me. Now, as a verbal processor, I find often that one thought leads to another. And I remember remarking as I was thinking about that image of bracing, that vehicular accidents that involve an impaired driver often end with the impaired driver leaving the scene of an accident unharmed. I was remembering my friend Jessie at the time, who had died in such an accident when we were 13. I remember saying, "It seems to me that bracing for impact is more about going limp, loosening all the muscles in one's body." This past Wednesday morning, as Elias and I took our children for breakfast because school was not an option given the election results, this memory came to mind. As during the pandemic, when the word pivot became my mantra, the word limber is holding me steady right now. There is bound to be impact. And the thing is, I don't know where it's going to come from, what it will look like, who will it involve, but it's coming. And while my instinct survival is telling me to brace myself, to tense up so that I can move fast, so that I can pivot, for my body to actually maneuver with limited injury, to survive, I can't be tense. I have to be limber and loose.
For those that were with us last night, you'll know that I also, besides being your regional lead, am also an Army Reserve chaplain and have been for the last 18 years. And over the last few days, I'll admit I've been in discernment again about whether the military uniform that I wear as a Unitarian Universalist minister serving as an Army Reserve chaplain, wondering whether it still fits. For 26 of the last 34 years, I have worn one or another version of a military uniform. As a combat soldier for the first 8 years, and for the last 18 years as a chaplain, a non-combatant religious leader in the United States Army Reserve. It is good discernment for me to be doing at this moment, and one day, sooner or later, I will decide that I have to put that uniform on for the last time. I've been in this kind of a discernment space. I think I'm keeping it on for now. But I've been in this kind of a discernment space a few times in relationship to my roles, both as a UU minister and as a military chaplain. And my colleague, Reverend Mandy's advice about remaining loose, about not tensing up, about not bracing, but instead moving with the shock and the pain of a time such as this is important advice. I remember when the 2016 election ended in shock and fear for myself and many of my beloveds. I started immediately to make some changes and decisions about my future, and a dear colleague, ministerial colleague, gave me the same advice that Reverend Mandy has shared with us this morning. To remain loose, to stay limber, to slow down, to take time to take care of ourselves, and to realize that what is coming will take time for us to understand it. And what this time needs, what a time like this needs, is rarely immediately apparent. And the time that is coming in this country will require things of us as Unitarian Universalists. But what that is not yet clear. It is too soon. But the next few years are going to call upon us to live the love that is at the center of our faith in ways we cannot even imagine yet. The weekend after the 2020 presidential election, I was on duty as an Army Reserve chaplain for the Combat Support Hospital where I served as senior hospital chaplain in Utica, New York. My unit ministry team consisted of myself, my chaplain candidate, kind of like an intern, my chaplain candidate, who was a young man of color who was in formation to become an Episcopal priest, and our religious affairs specialist, a sergeant who was a conservative Baptist, white-identified man. As a team, we had closed the door to my office on multiple occasions, and we had spoken about the politics of the election, about the nature of humanity, about divinity, and the values that each of us held, just the three of us. Sometimes those conversations were tense. Sometimes they were difficult. Sometimes they were frankly hilarious. But something about us all wearing that same uniform and having the door closed meant that we could have some conversations that it didn't seem the rest of our country was able to have. I remember the weekend after that election, me and the members of my team, we were sitting in uniform at a table in a lunch place when a civilian approached us and said, "Well, at least I know the three of you voted the right way." And it was clear in the moment from his t-shirt and hat what the right way meant. As he looked at us expectantly, I calmly said that I had voted for the other candidate. And then he looked at my chaplain candidate, who said, "So did I." And then he looked at our very conservative Baptist religious affairs sergeant, who said quietly, "So did I," like a confession. As the gentleman walked away in confusion, my chaplain candidate and I looked in wonder and some awe at our religious affairs sergeant, who quietly said, "What? I've been listening." That story came to me a few days ago when I thought about whether it was time to think again about whether my military chaplain uniform still fit. Because if I had not chosen to stay loose, to stay limber, to stay in uniform after the 2016 election, I would never have had the opportunity to be in that space of that closed office. And in the many moments like it that have happened before and since, to bear witness to the love which passes all understanding in the spaces and places that our Unitarian Universalist values do not always get to go. And it reminded me to remain loose right now, not to brace down, just not to make decisions just yet, to slow down, to breathe, and to be ready to bear witness to our values and our faith in the moments that are to come.
Our family lived for many years in a beautiful apartment on Drew University's campus. The apartment jutted up right against the university's arboretum and forest preserve. The apartments there felt more like tree houses than apartments. It was lovely to listen to the frogs in the spring and see the red fox in the woods in the autumn. When Hurricane Sandy hit, though, our apartment felt more like a box or maybe even a coffin in which we were trapped with all of those trees around us. The trees whipped in the wind, groaning and creaking under the assault of the gale-force wind. When all was said and done, though, the only trees that were lost from our apartment were along the path to campus. 10 large, stately pine trees in a forest of oaks, birches, maples, ash, tulip poplars were the only things that were lost. It felt so odd to me. 10 pine trees? I mean, they were old and massive, but none of the other trees had even lost significant branches. Why them? I learned later that pine trees have shallow root systems. Unlike other trees whose roots dig deep and down, pine trees, or at least whatever variety these were, had root systems that were barely below the surface, spreading outwards instead of downwards. In the wind, the trees toppled because their base was not strong enough to hold them up. To remain limber and loose, we need to have strong roots. Those roots let us survive the assaulting wind, absorb the deluge of water, and reach deep in the drought. When we remain limber and loose, we're protected from injury, not just of the body, but of the soul. We can watch the world crash and burn around us and reach for the fire extinguisher because our mind is not encapsulated in a preconceived idea of what should have happened. Our body is prepared for responsiveness, for swift action. Our roots hold us strong and give us the opportunity to bend, not break. Reverend David's story reminds me of another reason we need to be able to bend and why we need strong roots. In the divisions of politics, we need to remember that the roots of our values, our universalist theology, that all are worthy of love, means that we can hold love at the center. This means we do not compromise on what is important. I want to be very clear about that in this time. We will continue to be in dialogue, in love, with those we disagree with, but we will not capitulate, but rather to model our love for all, but most especially those who need it most. This is an act of integrity by embodying our values so we can change lives. Our roots hold us when the going gets tough, so we can enact a better world through our values, through our words, through our actions. In all the conversations that Reverend David had with his chaplains, they were listening, paying attention to his roots as he modeled them and why they mattered. And when that listening led to change, being limber led to grace. Grace for hearts and minds to change. Gracious space to become something new. We have time, dear ones, to prepare for the storm, to secure our roots, to trim unnecessary branches. Not much time, but we do have time. We need to tend to our trees so the forest can remain strong.
I think I thought that the roots of this country that I had served in one form or another most of my adult life, ran deep enough to insulate us from this storm. Roots built upon a set of ideals and values that while the good old US of A did not always live up to, our country was always striving for, I thought. And one of the reflections I have had in the past week is that the roots of our country that I thought I knew seem to have been much shallower than I imagined. I shared this thought with a Unitarian Universalist religious professional of color recently, and they smiled at me and said, "Welcome to a little bit of what it means to be marginalized in America, David." We did not wake up to a different country Wednesday morning. We just woke up to a greater clarity of who our country is and has always been. And my friend basically was saying to me, better late than never, David. And we are moving into some particularly dangerous times. The storm that Reverend Mandy named, we need to prepare to support one another, to embrace rather than debrace. Particularly those who we already know will be most at risk of harm in the coming days, including our trans-identified beloveds and those who are newer to this country than maybe we are. There will be asks of us in the coming days, of our congregations and of each of us, and some of those asks are going to come from myself and the Unitarian Universalist Association. And right now, part of securing our roots and trimming our branches need to be deciding what and who needs our protection, and what we are, both as a faith and as individuals, what we are willing to risk and able to risk. Yesterday, your Mid-America Regional Board of Trustees, of whom several are here with us this morning, met here in your church building. Thank you for letting us come to be with you, to begin that conversation amongst ourselves on behalf of the 183 congregations of your Mid-America region. There are ways that the region is called to help our congregations and our Unitarian Universalist beloveds to prepare for the coming days, and also to witness our shared Unitarian Universalist values into spaces and places in this world that obviously desperately need them. Just as there are ways that you, both individually and also as a congregation, you are called to protect, to challenge, to risk, and to witness. If this election has taught me anything, it is that it really does matter what people believe. If we are to build the world made whole, we Unitarian Universalists have to get past our reticence to challenge beliefs that run contrary to our values. We have to actively advocate for love, justice, interdependence, equity, generosity, and pluralism. For it is only by learning to risk advocating publicly for our values, together and as individuals in our individual lives and relationships. For it is only by being willing to take this risk that we can hope for the transformations necessary to build the beloved community that we dream of and that will help us survive and perhaps even thrive in the coming storm. For we do not deepen our roots and trim branches just to survive the storm, but to build the foundation for a new transformative day. Stay loose, breathe, embrace one another, protect, faithfully risk, challenge, and transform.
Beloveds, it does really matter what we believe, and to vocally share those beliefs to all who will listen. This requires us to rally our courage, to ensure that our roots will hold us through the storm, but that we will also thrive through that storm. That they are connected, our roots are connected to life-giving relationships that will cultivate hope and resilience. It is time to stretch and flex our muscles to bend so they are ready to move and resist, rather than brace for impact and break. I'm going to share some words with you that I shared with many of you who were here on Wednesday night, but they bear repeating. On Wednesday, I shared this quote from Ojibwe author Richard Wagamese. After all, who better to provide guidance than a people who has been besieged by the supremacy of colonization and facing genocide for hundreds of years by our government? Wagamese writes, "You can't test your courage timidly. You have to run through the fire, arms waving, legs pumping, and heart beating wildly with the effort of reclaiming something vital, lost, laid aside, and just plain forgotten. When you do that, you discover that we shine most brightly in community. The whole bedraggled, worn, frayed, and tattered lot of us, bound together forever by a shared courage, a family forged in the heat of earnest struggle." The time is here, beloveds, in which we must be ready. It is time to consider our strengths, our resources, our connections. It is time to dig deep and bend with grace. It is time to raise our voice against hate and share loudly, maybe scream loudly, our beliefs proudly. To do so, we must remember our history, our roots as a Unitarian Universalist faith tradition, because, beloveds, we are made for this moment. I shared on Wednesday these words, and I share them again. Let us remember our liberal faith has defied Nazis from World War II to Charleston. We showed up in Selma. We sided with labor unions. We marched for peace in the face of war, advocated for nuclear dearmament, fought for women's rights, cared for AIDS and HIV patients, showed up for love in all its queer forms, marched with Black Lives Matter, and see the beauty in the lives of our gender-expansive trans fabulous kins. Our legacy is strong, prophetic, and public. We are made for this moment. Come January, we must be ready. We do not know how or what or where or when. No, we do not know the particulars, but we do know what is coming. And so we can strengthen our roots, form alliances, evaluate resources, be clear about our values, especially to our neighbors and friends, because who knows who will be listening and will need our protection. We are made for these moments. And as Reverend David says, stay loose, breathe, embrace one another, protect, faithfully risk, challenge, and transform. Dig those roots deep, my beloveds. Make those connections strong. Together, we will thrive through this moment, not just survive.
Please rise in body and spirit and sing with us hymn number 348, Guide My Feet
faith tradition whose symbol, our chalice, was forged in World War II. We are armed with truth. We are blessed with courage. We are well skilled in navigating hate, and we are blessed to be in this fight together. We are ready, loose, limber, and most importantly, together. We are called to action. We will rise. And so I invite you for our closing music to join in singing We Will Rise by Batya Levine.
We rise, humbly-hearted rise.
So
Won't
may it
be
be.
divided, rise.
And now I invite you to join me in our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish the light of this chalice, but not the light in our hearts. Until we meet again, may the warmth of our community carry you.